The inheritance she never deserved. I was hiding behind the door of my own office. When I heard my daughter say she could barely wait for my funeral, she laughed as she spoke. Laughed as if my death were a funny joke, an expected event, a liberation. And the person she was laughing with was a man I had welcomed as my son-in-law just 2 years ago. But before I continue this story, help me by clicking like and subscribing right now. I also want to greet you. Leave your name, your city, and the word present in the comments. I want to know where you're listening from, even the most distant places. Block 1. That Tuesday started like any other. I arrived at the bakery at 5 in the morning, as I've done for 40 years. The smell of fresh dough, caramelizing sugar, coffee brewing. These aromas have always been my comfort, my certainty that I had built something real, something solid. But that day, I had forgotten some important documents at home. I went back around 10 in the morning, without telling anyone. My daughter Amanda and her husband Edward were staying with me temporarily. They had sold their apartment 3 months earlier, saying they were looking for something better, more suited to the new standard of living they wanted to build. I entered through the back door, as I always do. The house was silent, or at least I thought it was. I went upstairs toward my office, but stopped in the hallway when I heard voices. The door was ajar. I would recognize those voices anywhere. My daughter and my son-in-law. My first instinct was to walk in and greet them. But something in the tone of the conversation made me stop. There was a sinister intimacy in those voices, a complicity that sent a chill down my spine. Then I heard it. Edward said the power of attorney was almost ready, that his lawyer guaranteed that, with the right documents, they could take control of the company in less than 6 months. He said I was already too old to manage everything alone, and that no one would question a concerned daughter wanting to help her elderly mother. Amanda laughed. That laugh I had known since she was a baby, but which now sounded completely different. She said she could barely wait for the day when all of it would be theirs. She said I had already lived too long, that it was time to enjoy what she called an early inheritance. And then came the phrase that destroyed me inside. She said the Caldwell name was a burden she had carried since childhood, that she was embarrassed to say she was the daughter of a baker, of a woman who spent her entire life smelling like flour and sugar. She said when everything was theirs, the first thing she would do was change the company name. Caldwell was for poor people, for folks without class. My legs trembled. I leaned my hand against the wall to keep from falling. My own daughter, the girl I raised alone after my husband died of a heart attack at 45. The girl to whom I gave everything, absolutely everything. She was planning to rob me, discard me, erase my name as if I were a mistake to be corrected. Edward continued talking. He said the best strategy was to convince me to sign a general power of attorney, claiming it was to make day-to-day paperwork easier. He said old people are naive, they trust their children too much, that I would never suspect anything. Amanda agreed. She said I was pathetic, that I was always clinging to her, that all she had to do was smile and give me a little affection, and I would sign anything. She said it had been like that her whole life, that I was easy to manipulate. I stood there, paralyzed, for another 10 minutes. I heard every detail of their plan. The power of attorney they would make me sign. The sale of the bakery to a supermarket chain that had already made an $8 million offer. The apartment they would buy in Miami with the money. The new life far from me, far from everything I represented. When I finally managed to move, I went down the stairs in silence. I left through the same door I had entered. I sat in my car and stayed there, staring at the steering wheel, unable to cry. The pain was too great for tears. It was a hole in my chest, a void that sucked all the air from my lungs. I, Helen Caldwell, 68 years old, owner of Sweet Helen's, a bakery chain that employs 300 people across 12 locations throughout Illinois. I, who started selling cake jars at school gates 40 years ago. I, who woke up at 3 in the morning to have everything ready before customers arrived. I, who never took a vacation, who never bought anything for myself, who gave everything so my daughter could have a better life than mine. I was being treated as an obstacle, as a problem to be solved, as a senile old woman who needed to be discarded so they could live the life they thought they deserved. At that moment, sitting in the car in front of my own house, something changed inside me. The pain didn't disappear, but it transformed. It became something else. It became determination. It became cold rage. It became a plan. If my daughter wanted war, she would have war. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. I hadn't built an empire from nothing to be destroyed by my own offspring. I started the car and drove back to the bakery. I had a lot of work to do. And the first thing was to call my lawyer. Because that power of attorney they wanted so badly, it would never be signed. And what I was about to do would change everything forever. Block to friends, every story I tell is published every day. But YouTube will only show it to you if you press the red subscribe button. Please do that right now while I'm talking. Press subscribe, turn on notifications, and you'll never miss another story. Done. Thank you. Let me tell you where I come from, because maybe then you'll understand why that conversation destroyed me so much. I was born in 1956 in a wooden shack on the outskirts of Chicago. My mother, Mama Irene, was a laundress. She washed clothes for the wealthy ladies in the nice neighborhoods, from sunrise to sunset. Her hands cracked from all the soap. My father, Tony, was a bricklayer. He built other people's houses while ours didn't even have a proper floor. We had nothing, but we had dignity. My mother always said that poor folks can be poor in money, but never in character. She taught me how to make cake before I learned to read. She said food made with love feeds the soul, not just the body. At 14, I was already helping my mother with laundry deliveries. And on the way, I sold the cakes I made at dawn. Cornmeal cake, carrot cake, orange cake. Everything wrapped in wax paper, sold at factory gates to workers coming off the morning shift. The money I earned went straight to helping at home. I never had a real childhood. Never had a doll, never had a birthday party, never had new shoes. But I didn't complain. I dreamed. I dreamed that one day I would have my own bakery. A beautiful place where people would walk in and feel happy just from the smell. At 19, I met Marcus. He worked as a bus driver, a simple man, hardworking with an easy smile and a huge heart. We married in a simple ceremony at the neighborhood church. I made my own dress with fabric my mother had been saving for years for a special occasion. Marcus was my safe harbor. He came home tired, but always with a cheap gift that was worth gold to me. Once it was a heart-shaped cake pan. Another time, a small bag of vanilla he bought at the market. To him, they were little gifts. To me, they were proof of love. Amanda was born in 1983. A difficult delivery at the crowded public hospital. But when they placed that tiny baby in my arms, all red and crying loud, I swore to myself that she would have a different life than mine. She would never go hungry. She would never wear patched clothes. She would never feel the shame of being poor. Marcus worked double shifts to support us. I made sweets at home while Amanda slept. I took orders from neighbors, made birthday cakes, pies for parties, bonbons for weddings. Anything that would earn me a few extra dollars. But on a June morning in 1991, life took a cruel turn. Marcus was driving the bus on his usual route. He felt a sharp pain in his chest, lost control, and crashed into a pole. Massive heart attack. He was 45 years old. I was 35 with an 8-year-old daughter. What I was left with was a meager pension of $600 a month, a mountain of bills, and a hole in my chest that I thought would never heal. I spent 3 days locked in the house, not eating, not sleeping, just staring at the ceiling. Amanda slept beside me, holding my hand, not understanding why Daddy wasn't coming back. On the 4th day, my mother knocked on the door, walked in, pulled me by the arm, and said something that changed everything. She said I had two choices, sink or swim. And that little girl wasn't going to pay for my fears. I got up. I took the $1,200 Marcus had hidden under the mattress, our emergency fund, and went to a used equipment store. I bought an old commercial oven and 2 mixers that barely worked. I turned my garage into a makeshift kitchen. I started taking small orders. Birthday cakes for neighbors, sweets for children's parties, pies for office meetings. I woke up at 3 in the morning and worked until midnight. I took Amanda to school in the morning, picked her up in the afternoon, helped with her homework while the dough rested. In 5 years, I had 3 employees. In 10 years, I rented a commercial space and opened the first Sweet Helen's location. In 15 years, there were 5 stores. In 20 years, 12 locations, my own production facility, and 300 employees. Amanda grew up watching all of this. She saw her mother sweat, fight, lose, win, and rise again. I enrolled her in the best private school in the area. I paid for SAT prep courses. She got into a business program at an expensive private college, a fortune I paid without blinking. I gave her an apartment as a gift when she turned 30. A nice 2-bedroom in a good neighborhood that cost $400,000. I gave her a brand new car. I deposited $10,000 into her account every month, just so she wouldn't struggle while she was trying to find herself professionally. But Amanda never found herself. She changed jobs like she changed clothes. There was always an excuse. The boss was difficult, the environment was toxic, the work was beneath her level. And I always accepted it, always understood, always paid the bills. Then she met Edward 3 years ago. A handsome man, well-dressed, from a traditional family. Fancy last name, refined manners, smooth talk. He won me over with compliments and smiles, saying he admired my journey, that I was an inspiration. I was an idiot. A complete idiot. Because while he was flattering me, he was plotting behind my back. And my own daughter was his accomplice. But I still didn't know everything. The worst was yet to come. Block 3. After hearing that conversation, I spent 3 days pretending nothing had happened. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Looking at Amanda at breakfast, hearing her call me mommy with that sweet voice, watching her kiss my forehead before I left for work. Everything was fake. Everything was a lie. And I had to swallow it while I prepared my counterattack. On Wednesday, I called my trusted manager to my office. Patricia had worked with me for 22 years. She started as a kitchen helper, washing pans and sweeping floors. Today she was my right hand, the person who knew every detail of the operation. More importantly, she was the only person I truly trusted. I closed the door, sat across from her, and told her everything. Every word I had heard, every detail of their plan. Patricia went pale. The coffee cup trembled in her hand. She looked at me with those eyes that knew my entire story, and said she had always been suspicious of Edward. She said he asked too many questions about the company, about the contracts, about the revenue. Questions a normal son-in-law wouldn't ask. I asked her to investigate discreetly. She had contacts, she knew people. I wanted to know everything about Edward Montgomery, every detail of his life. What she discovered a week later left me cold. Edward wasn't who he claimed to be. The traditional family he boasted about had been bankrupt for years. His father had lost everything in bad investments and was living off relatives' charity. His mother had died in debt. The luxury apartment where they lived before they sold it was rented, not owned. And Edward had debts. Many debts. $300,000 in maxed-out credit cards. $100,000 in personal loans. $50,000 owed to loan sharks. He was drowning, and the only lifeline was my company. But the worst discovery came later. Patricia managed to access the emails Edward used on the computer at the bakery office. He had the bad habit of checking personal things at work when he thought no one was watching. There were messages to a lawyer, planning every step of the trap. How to convince me to sign the power of attorney. How to claim I was becoming senile, incapable of managing the business. How to take control without raising suspicion. And there were messages between him and Amanda. In them, my daughter laughed at my naivety. She said I was a foolish old woman who believed any story. That all she had to do was give me some affection and I would melt. That it would be a piece of cake to manipulate me. One message in particular made me want to vomit. Amanda wrote that after they sold everything, she would never have to set foot in a bakery again. She said she was embarrassed to tell her friends that her mother was a baker. That when people asked what I did, she said I was an entrepreneur in the food industry. Because baker sounded too poor. Baker.poor. Embarrassed. I, who woke up at 3 in the morning to have everything ready. I, whose hands were calloused from so much work. I, who built everything from scratch to give her a life I never had. I was a source of embarrassment. That night, alone in the bakery office with those printed emails scattered on the desk, I made a decision. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't confront them. I would plan. I called my lawyer, Robert, a man who had been helping me for 15 years, since the company started growing. I explained everything. I showed him the evidence. I asked him to create a legal shield that would prevent any attempt at a takeover. He worked for 2 weeks. When he presented the result, I could barely believe the elegance of that legal trap. He had redone my will with specific clauses, created a protected corporate structure, transferred part of the shares to a trust I controlled, but which couldn't be accessed by direct heirs without meeting specific conditions. And the main condition was this: any heir who attempted to take control of the company, through fraudulent power of attorney, who attempted to have me declared legally incompetent due to alleged mental incapacity, or who was proven to be involved in a scheme of financial manipulation against me, would automatically lose all inheritance rights. Not just the company. Everything. Real estate, investments, bank accounts. Everything. It was a silent trap. If Amanda respected me, if she gave up the plan, nothing would happen. She would inherit normally when I died. But if she went through with the betrayal, she would lose every penny. The power of attorney they wanted so badly would destroy them. And they had no idea. But one piece of the puzzle was still missing. I needed someone to take over the company when I was no longer here. Someone I trusted. Someone who loved Sweet Helen's as much as I did. And that someone was not my daughter. I began to observe my employees with different eyes. And that's when I noticed Marina. Block for if you want to know how the story ends and discover many others, press the red subscribe button. It's free and helps me a lot. Marina was 34 years old and had been working with me for 12 years. She started as a bakery assistant, barely knew how to make frosting properly. But she had a desire to learn that impressed me. She stayed after hours to practice, arrived before everyone else to observe the more experienced bakers. I invested in her. I paid for pastry courses, sent her to workshops, let her create, and she never disappointed me. Today, the artisan cake line at Sweet Helen's, the one that grows 30% a year, was her creation. But most importantly, Marina respected me. She called me Mrs. Caldwell with genuine affection. She asked for advice, listened attentively, applied what she learned. Unlike my daughter, who treated me like a walking ATM, I called Marina to my office on a Friday afternoon. She came in nervous, thinking she had done something wrong. I told her to sit down and asked her a direct question. I asked her why she kept working with me, since she was so talented and could earn much more at any upscale bakery in the city. She was silent for a few seconds. Then she looked at me with moist eyes and said that I had given her a chance when no one else would. That I had paid for her mother's treatment when she had cancer 7 years ago. That I had been more of a mother to her than her own biological mother, who had abandoned her as a child. I have forgotten that detail. Gloria, Marina's mother, had worked with me for years before getting sick. When she was diagnosed, I paid for everything. Chemotherapy, medications, private hospital. Gloria didn't make it, but she died with dignity, not owing anyone anything. Marina said that's why she would never leave. Because loyalty is repaid with loyalty. At that moment, looking at that 34-year-old woman with talent in her hands and gratitude in her heart, I made my decision. I told her everything. About Amanda, about Edward, about the plan to rob me. She went pale, then red with anger. She said she had always been suspicious of Amanda, that she had never set foot in the bakery to visit her mother, that she treated the employees as if they were invisible. Then I made my proposal. I told her I wanted to legally adopt her as my daughter, that she would become Marina Caldwell, and that she would be my heir. Marina cried for an hour. At first, she thought it was a joke, then a test. But when she saw the documents from the courthouse, when she understood that I was offering her a surname, a family, a future, she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. The adult adoption process was quick. Within weeks, Marina was legally my daughter. Marina Caldwell, the surname my biological daughter found embarrassing. My daughter of the heart would carry with pride. Amanda and Edward knew nothing. They continued living in my house, eating at my table, plotting behind my back. And I let them. Because the higher they climbed, the more painful the fall would be. The wedding was set for November. A luxurious ceremony at a 5-star hotel in Chicago. 300 guests, imported decorations, French catering. Everything very expensive. And guess who was paying for most of it? Me, of course. The foolish mother, the naive old woman, the walking ATM. But I had a plan for that day. A plan Amanda and Edward would never expect. The wedding day dawned sunny. I got ready calmly, put on my best dress, styled my hair, applied the lipstick I saved for special occasions. I looked in the mirror and saw a 68-year-old woman about to do something that would change everything. Marina met me at the hotel entrance. She looked beautiful in a green dress, discreet, nervous. I squeezed her hand and said it was time. The ceremony was beautiful. I have to admit, Amanda looked like a princess in her imported white dress. Edward smiled as if he had won the lottery. And in a way, he thought he had. The guests applauded, took photos, toasted the perfect couple. But during the reception, when the DJ announced it was time for speeches, I asked for the microphone. Amanda frowned. Edward looked at me with suspicion. But no one could deny the mother of the bride her speech, could they? I climbed onto the small stage, looked at the 300 guests, and began to speak. Block 5, I said this was a very special day. That my daughter was starting a new chapter in her life. And so was I. I pulled a document from my pocket and showed it to everyone. I said that paper contained my new will, notarized with legal standing, irrevocable. The silence in the hall was absolute. I explained that Sweet Helen's, the company I built from nothing, employed 300 people and brought in $20 million a year. I said that company was my life, my sweat, my story, and that I had decided to ensure it would be in good hands when I was gone. Amanda started walking toward me, but Edward grabbed her arm. I continued. I said that, according to my new will, 50% of Sweet Helen's shares would go to the Marcus Caldwell Foundation, a nonprofit I had created in honor of my late husband, a foundation that would offer free vocational training to underprivileged youth. Murmurs among the guests. Amanda was as white as her wedding dress. I said the other 50% would go to my daughter, my legally adopted daughter, Marina Caldwell. I gestured for Marina to come forward. She climbed onto the stage, trembling, holding my hand. I introduced Marina as my heir. I said she had worked with me for 12 years, that she was talented, honest, loyal, everything a daughter should be. Amanda screamed from the middle of the hall. She said I had gone crazy, that she was going to sue me, that she was a legitimate daughter and had rights. I looked at her with all the calm in the world and said she was my biological daughter. Yes. But biological children who planned to rob their own mother, who schemed to have her declared legally incompetent alleging dementia, who are embarrassed by the surname, that raised and those children lose the right to inherit anything. The hall exploded in murmurs. Cell phones began recording. I pulled another document from my pocket. I said these were the emails Amanda and Edward had exchanged over the past months. The detailed plan to make me sign a fraudulent power of attorney. The conversation with the lawyer about how to have me declared incompetent. The messages where Amanda said she was embarrassed to be the daughter of a baker. I read aloud the message where Amanda said she could barely wait for my funeral. The silence was deafening. Edward tried to leave, but some guests blocked his way. Amanda was crying, makeup running down her face, her wedding dress looking like a shroud. I said that the power of attorney they wanted so badly would never be signed. That the company they wanted to sell would keep operating, employing 300 families, carrying the Caldwell name with pride. I returned the microphone to the DJ. I stepped off the stage arm in arm with Marina. We walked toward the exit while 300 people watched us in absolute silence. At the door, I stopped and looked back one last time. Amanda was in the middle of the hall on her knees, sobbing. Edward had disappeared, probably fled through the back door. The perfect wedding had turned into a public nightmare, and I felt something strange. It wasn't joy, it wasn't sadness, it was liberation. The following days were chaotic. The video of my speech went viral on social media. Millions of views, comments of all kinds, most supporting me, some criticizing. But I didn't care about strangers' opinions. Amanda tried to sue me. She alleged coercion, manipulation, mental incapacity. She lost at every level. The documents were solid. The evidence was irrefutable. Her lawyer, the same one who had helped plan the scheme, was reported to the ethics board. Edward disappeared. I found out later he had fled to Spain, afraid of the loan sharks he owed money to. The marriage was annulled in less than 3 months. Amanda was left with nothing. No husband, no inheritance, no apartment because the apartment I had given her was in my name, and I took possession back. She went to live at a friend's house, then in a rented room in a boarding house. She got a job as a saleswoman at a mall store. She made $3,000 a month. My daughter, who was embarrassed to be a baker's daughter, was now working selling shoes at a mall. I should feel sorry. Maybe a real mother would. But I only felt a cold emptiness and the certainty that I had done the right thing. Marina took over the management of Sweet Helen's. She did an incredible job. She innovated, expanded, modernized. Revenue grew 40% in the first year. We opened 5 more stores. The Marcus Caldwell Foundation graduated its first class of 200 students. And I was finally able to rest. Block 6 months after the disastrous wedding, I was sitting on the porch of my house, drinking coffee and looking at the garden. The morning sun warmed my face. Birds sang in the trees. For the first time in decades, I was in no hurry to go anywhere. Marina appeared at the door with an envelope in her hand. She said it was a letter from Amanda. I hesitated before taking it. I wasn't sure I wanted to read it, but I ended up opening it. The letter was 3 pages long. Cramped handwriting, some words smudged. Amanda said she had understood. That she had spent these months reflecting, working, living like a regular person for the first time in her life. That she finally comprehended the value of work, of effort, of dignity. She asked for forgiveness. Not for the inheritance, not for the money. For the disrespect. For having been embarrassed by the surname her mother built with so much sacrifice. For having planned to betray me instead of honoring me. She said she didn't want anything from me. Just a chance to talk, to apologize, looking into my eyes. I slowly folded the letter. I sat looking at the garden for a long time. I don't know if I will forgive Amanda. Maybe one day. Maybe never. But I know that forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. She made choices. I made mine. And now each of us lives with the results. What I learned in these 68 years of life is that love is not accepting anything. Love is not being a doormat. Love is not letting yourself be destroyed in the name of blood. True love has limits, has respect, has dignity. Caldwell was never a name for poor people. Caldwell has always been a warrior's name. And this warrior still has a lot of life left to live. Today, sitting on this porch, with the sun warming my face and the coffee cooling in my cup, I finally feel at peace. It's not a perfect peace. It still hurts to think about the daughter I lost. But it's a deserved peace. A peace I earned. And if Amanda has really changed, if she has really understood, maybe one day we can rebuild something. Not what it was before. That died. But something new, based on truth, on respect, on lessons learned. But for now, I'm okay. And that's what matters. If you enjoyed this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments which part impressed you the most. There's more tomorrow. See you there.